Hello and welcome to this episode of Roots of the Valley. For most of our episodes so far, we've stayed in the Kittitas and the Yakima Valley. However, today we're going to learn a little bit about the Teanaway Valley, specifically about the small logging town of Casland. Today I'm speaking with Mr. Fred Kreuger, who's an expert on this topic. He was also a history teacher in the area, beloved by all. Thank you so much, Fred, for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about Casland. When was it founded?
Well, Casland is a logging community, and it was founded after the Forest Service came in 1905 or so. That area was virgin timber in the Teanaway Valley. There was homesteading along the river, and Casland got started above the homesteads, and it was able to utilize the river as its main avenue of transporting logs down. It was not a lumber company itself. It was a logging company. So the logs had to be cut into lumber, and those logs were floated down the Yakima River to Yakima, where Boise Logging Company operated. See, Boise Cascade is Boise merged with Casland at one eventually.
Okay.
Making it one company. Now, the loggers that came in to work at Casland, they had to have facilities to house the loggers. You'd have as many as 40 to 50 loggers. There was a school built. They had a school. They also had a contract with Dr. Taylor in Ellensburg. Taylor Richardson Clinic, most people know about in Ellensburg. He was in charge of providing the medical service for the loggers at Casland. Now, Casland, when they cut the logs, they had to deck them along the Teanaway River. And the decking required cooperation and some leasing with homesteaders along the river. And the decking was necessary to float the logs downriver to the Yakima River. So when the spring runoff was taking place, there was some damming of the water to build up the water level and the pressure. And then the dam would be broke open, the logs would be dumped in, and theoretically, they should all float down to the Yakima River. But the logs sometimes got jammed up. We have pictures, and you'll see those, where the entire length of the Yakima River, the straight channel, is so full of logs, you can't see the river. So we call that a log jam. Now, how do you get this jigsaw puzzle to work?
Let me guess, you pull a couple of logs and hope for the best.
Well, you got to go down to where the front is, because they tried to back up the river some more and then give another shot of water, thinking it's like flushing the river. And ultimately, it got so labor intensive, it was so costly, and the company decided, we're going to do this differently. We're going to go to work, and we're going to contract with the Yakima Boom Company to employ loggers for a river drive. We'll deck the logs down to the river, and we'll dump them into the river. And the Yakima Boom Company hired about 75 loggers who would ride the logs. Yes, they would ride the logs. And when there was a log jam, you'll see it in one of the pictures, they hit a sandbar, the logs would back up. They would get out, and they keep in mind, this water's cold. They don't have rubber suits on. They don't have boots on. They got cork shoes on with those spikes in the bottom.
Oh no.
So that's how you stood on a log.
Yeah.
And you were able to, you had a tool called a PV. Now, if you lost your PV, that's considered humiliation. So every logger that was employed to ride those logs hung on to his PV for dear life. And that was used to roll the logs back into the deeper water. And when you had a log jam, you used the PVs to try to break the log jam up and then continue the drive downriver. Now, the Yakima Boom Company would put a barrier across the river to back the logs up, like a big chain. And behind the log drive, there was a boat called a Wanigan. That was the chuck wagon. And it also had and you'll see that in the pictures here. It would go to work, and they knew where they should tie up, and they would make up the meals for all those loggers riding those logs down. And the tents were put up. So this was sleeping out in the outdoors as well. You had to be young to handle this kind of work, believe me. And I don't know if I could take even the thought of getting on one of those logs and riding it down, but it was a skill. And that's what these men had. And that's how Boise Lumber Company was able to get the logs to the mill.
So how far was that actually between Casland and where they got off in Yakima?
Only the Boom Company would know. And I don't know, I haven't seen a document, how much distance you could get all your logs downriver. And these logs are not small.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is virgin timber. And, if you stood by a log, it's about your height.
I'm 6'3", by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how big these logs are.
Wow.
Yeah. And anyhow, ultimately, the river drives ended up, they built, the Rosa Dam was going to be constructed.
Okay.
And so we're looking at a log drive somewhere between 1905 and 1910. In that time area, that's when these river drives were being used. I don't know how many of them were used, but they are used. We have pictures to prove that. But ultimately, there was a move on to create what was called a Teanaway Railroad Company. Now, the Teanaway Railroad Company, if it gets incorporated, has the power of eminent domain.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So now we can give up on the river drives and build a rail line at Teanaway Junction up to Casland, and then from Casland we can build spur lines into the canyons where the logs are. And this really was the big change. And I think this was about the time where we find Boise and Cascade Lumber eventually coming together. And so the NP Railroad then had a role to play in this. And the lawyers did too, because the property owners did not like somebody driving a rail line through their meadow or their property. But eventually, these legal issues were resolved, and the rail line continued to operate. And what the Casland would do is they would go to work and put homes on the flat cars, and they would run those up into the canyon, and you have a picture of them. And one of the flat cars would be a cooking area, and then a couple of other flat cars would be living areas. And there was even a saw sharpening facility on flat cars. And they would take a donkey engine and they would lift these off and set them on the ground. And that became your home during the summer months. And that's how the logging was done up there. And the logs were put on flat cars. And these were a little bit smaller. The engines were smaller. They were called a Shea engine. They were about 70 ton is what these Shea engines weighed. But there would be with that Shea engine a donkey engine, and that would be on a flat car. And some of the movie film that you'll see will show actual donkey engine moving and loading the cars to go down to Teanaway Junction. And at Teanaway Junction, there was a reload facility. And the NP Railroad would bring their larger logging cars, and they would be reloaded and then taken down to Yakima to the Boise Cascade mill. And this continued up until, oh gosh, that would be, it was in the 70s, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Because ultimately Boise Cascade was stopped production because what happened was the logging was going downhill in the 70s because of the environmental movement that was taking place. So you couldn't clear cut any longer. You had to protect the spotted owl and so on. You had a lot of government regulation taking place. So the logging industry began to really suffer a serious decline in the 70s. And eventually, well, now you have wildfires. Yeah. And a lot of this is due to the fact that the land was no longer managed for logging. Now, if you go back in time, the way the logging was done, clear cutting, in the Teanaway, you had, this was a watershed area. There's three rivers, the North Fork, the Middle Fork, and the South Fork flowed into what we call the Teanaway River. And by the Teanaway is an Indian name, meaning fish and berries. Okay. It's an Indian name. So the Native Americans used this area long before it became a logging area. And one of the things that would happen in the spring is the melt was so rapid that the Teanaway could not handle it. It flooded. It was down below where Redbridge is. That whole field in there was full of rock. Roy Thomas had a ranch there, and I knew Roy. And that whole area was all cleaned up and was usable land for grazing and stuff. And that's, but the floods continued year after year because of the clear cutting and the rapid runoff. Now the state owns that, and I think the acreage is like 30,000 acres. It's huge, and it's being managed as a watershed to feed water into the Yakima River for irrigation and for fish.
Okay.
That's one of the things that it's now being managed for.
Okay. So going back to Casland, I see you have a map of Kittitas back here. Can you point to where it actually was?
Right in there.
Okay.
There's the North Fork, the Middle Fork, and the South Fork. Now, the glacier that was in there 10,000 years ago was a fairly small glacier. And when it came down, the highway, as you go to Wenatchee now, you're on top of a terminal moraine. The glacier was like a snowplow pushing the topsoil and all the crushed rock and everything. And when it started to recede, it left behind this channel that you have today, called the Teanaway River. And there was talk of putting an earthen dam in there in order to build up enough water for irrigation and fish back in the 1980s. And what it turned out that there's not enough earth there to build a dam. And there was a lot of opposition. So it was never, so the Teanaway is left as it was created by the glacier.
Okay. So here we are today in 2025, and obviously Casland is no longer there. What year did people start leaving that area, and why was that?
Well, when Casland was sold, or when the Boise Cascade Company was sold, or stopped all logging, that's when everything kind of closed. That would be in the 70s. There wasn't much going on then at all.
Okay.
There was the administrative office. You have a picture of it. The school. The land was leased to for Camp Illahee. It became a youth camp.
Oh, really?
Area. Yeah, and that lasted for a number of years, and it was also used by Ike Bresco and his Boy Scouts. But Camp Illahee was a very popular summer camp for youth, and that organization was in Ellensburg.
Okay.
They built facilities there for the girls for summer camp.
Okay. And what's the land used for now?
Well, the state bought it.
Oh, really?
The state owns it, and it's now being managed, like I said, as a watershed, and they're working on for recreational also. Where Camp Illahee was, where the main buildings were for Casland, that probably is going to be for camping. You come in with your camper and so on. There's some unique, and I have pictures of those you won't see. There's some unique sand rock formations in there that are really, really unusual. And those will need to be protected. And they're in the midst, as I understand it, of putting together some kind of a plan I'm not involved in it, but I know it exists. And it's a cooperative effort with the county and with the state. And I don't know when the results are going to be, where it's going to be done and open. I have no idea.
All right.
That's where we're going.
Thank you so much for watching that episode about Casland. Now, this interview with Mr. Kreuger went very long, and in fact, we decided to cut it in half. So in 2 weeks, our episode is going to be about Jonesville, a mining town that's also up in the Teanaway Valley and that also no longer has anybody living there. Again, that's going to come out in 2 weeks, and you can watch any of our episodes on our YouTube channel, along with more episodes of Roots of the Valley that'll come out on the first and third Sundays of each month. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.